What challenges and opportunities do cryptos face in the coming quarter, especially following the election? Will we see major changes to the crypto markets following the election? We'll find out with the next guest, Dean Skurka. He is a president and CEO of WonderFi, a very large crypto platform. We'll talk about WonderFi in just a minute. Dean, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Great to see you and happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Everyone's wondering what the crypto markets are pricing in terms of either a Trump or Harris victory. Do we have any clues right now, Dean? We're speaking on the 25th of October, so it may change by the time we finish recording.
Absolutely. I mean, look, what we've seen over the last few weeks has definitely been a correlation with Bitcoin and crypto prices moving upward as Trump's odds to win the election have increased as well. As we sit here today on Poly Market, one of the largest prediction markets out there, and we can debate how much weight to put into these prediction markets. But when you look at Poly Market, Trump's odds currently sit at 65%. Over the last 2 weeks, they've run up meaningfully, about 10% from around 55%. And at the same time, Bitcoin's moved in the same direction, closing in on the $70,000 USD mark. And so we're definitely seeing a strong correlation between people's expectations of Trump winning the election and what that could mean for crypto on the other side of the election.
The Bitcoin price is currently hovering around 70, $66,000. It was at 70 just a few days ago. But anyway, $66,000. It's been on sort of this downward trend. Let me just take a look at my screen here. And people are saying that Bitcoin's pricing in a Trump victory because Trump, I guess, has been more vocal about supporting Bitcoin. He wants to promote a Bitcoin strategic reserve, among other things. But the price just doesn't reflect that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, what's your interpretation of what the price is signaling in terms of the election? You see, it's been on just ever since the beginning of February. It's just been going down, the longer
Yeah, I
term
think I
trend.
think that'd be around March where we hit all-time highs of
Yeah.
73,000. The big story at the beginning of the year was the Bitcoin ETFs. Those launched in the US for the first time the first week of January. Those
Hmm.
have been some of the most successful ETF launches in ever. When you look at this year as an example, there's been about 575 ETFs launched in 2024. 14 of the top 30 by inflows are either spot Bitcoin or spot Ethereum ETFs, and the top four would be Bitcoin ETFs. So there has been a really strong response to these ETF launches in the US. Real meaningful inflows have come into these products. A lot of that was reflected earlier in the year when Bitcoin ran to about 73,000, topping in March. And since then, there has been this prolonged consolidation period. We have started to see, if you expand this chart into, call it mid-September into where we are today, a
Yeah.
relative run up in price, largely reflected by where Trump's odds have begun to increase. And so I think there has been this lag, call it through the mid part of the year. But as the election comes closer, and as we've also entered a rate cutting environment around mid-September in the US and earlier in Canada, you have started to see this run up exactly. And many are expecting things to continue if obviously the election goes a certain way.
Yeah, it's up about 28, 29% since the bottom of September. Okay, so that's a good point, Dean. What changes, if any, do you expect to happen for the crypto landscape under either a Harris or a Trump victory?
Yeah, I would expect it to in the short term. I'd say right now Kamala and her campaign are largely tied to what's happened over the last 4 years within the Biden administration. That has been a difficult environment to navigate for crypto companies. There have been multiple enforcement actions led by the SEC against Coinbase, Kraken, OpenSea, Uniswap, some really large, well-established cryptocurrency providers servicing the broader industry. That has made it harder for companies to navigate the US market. Obviously, it represents a meaningful opportunity for platforms like BitBuy and Coinsquare or others. But when there's such an unclear regulatory regime and a seemingly negative sentiment, at the SEC and at the top, it makes it hard for companies like ours to really grow and expand within the US market. And so a lot of platforms have been waiting on the sidelines to see how things play out. But at the same time, within the US, you have seen meaningful lobby efforts from some of these platforms and others with respect to trying to push things in the right direction. And so ultimately, while it may appear when you look at some of the correlation recently between Trump's odds and the price of Bitcoin, that the industry is hopeful for a Trump presidency, we believe ultimately if Kamala wins, things will become more favorable for the crypto industry. It just may take a little bit longer to play out, and it may not be as prevalent in the short term with respect to pricing.
So the price may adjust short term if Kamala wins, if that's what is that what you're saying?
I would expect in the short term, you would see a far more positive reaction to price if Trump were to win than Kamala. But if we were to look at the totality of the administration over that 4 year period, I ultimately think it'll largely be positive in either direction.
Is it safe to say that Bitcoin has been following poly market odds for a Trump victory? Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me. Certainly, when you look at that 28% run up from in and around early September, I don't know exactly where you were, or I guess from the September lows to where we are today. I would say a lot of it has been driven by this overarching theme that Trump is more likely to win the election than he was, say, even at the beginning of September.
I want to talk about this next chart here. This is the Bitcoin dominance chart, and it's basically just showing Bitcoin as a percentage of total crypto market cap. And the dominance has been rising ever since 2022. We're now at the highest point, or we have been at the highest point for quite some time, but we're now at the highest point since before 2021, where we had this huge explosion of altcoins, and the retail space really flooded into altcoins. But are we going to see a retracement back to its pre-2021 highs of 70%? Not like before altcoins were introduced for the first time. It's that there was a time when Bitcoin dominance was 97% of the market, but 70%, does that make sense to you as a normalization?
Yeah, I mean, look, right now you've seen a strong reaction to Bitcoin dominance as you're showing this year, again, largely driven by the success of these Bitcoin ETFs. Talking about 21 billion of net inflows year to date. And, a lot of that has created meaningful, dominance with respect to the broader market. You look at the Ethereum ETF, far less successful in terms of net inflows. I think it's around 6 billion. But a lot of this chart would reflect the success of those ETF products. What we typically see in a cycle is Bitcoin leads as a catalyst. It breaks out, it has really strong performance, and then profits and mind share start to flow into Ethereum and some of the other altcoins. And so, you'll probably see, a continued run up here through the election. But at a certain point, mind share and profits and investment dollars will start to flow into Ethereum. Solana's had a breakout year, so you'll likely see meaningful inflows into Solana as Bitcoin profits are realized. And then, of course, some of the other altcoins. It's not easy to reflect within the Bitcoin dominance chart because a lot of these meme coins are relatively new, but there has been a really strong trend emerging this year where retail has really embraced meme coins on the whole. And I think, that will start to chip away at dominance moving into next year. But what you're likely to see in the near term is a continuation of this chart as inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs continue to ramp up. The accessibility of these ETFs will just continue to push Bitcoin dominance in this direction. But at a certain point, like I mentioned, profits, mind share will all start to flow into the altcoins and then some of the meme coins as well.
It's interesting because even the approval of the ETH ETF didn't detract from this dominance from rising. If you look at the Ethereum versus the versus Bitcoin as a ratio, that ratio has been falling for quite some time. The dominance of Bitcoin versus not just small alts, not just the meme coins, but the next largest alt, ETH, has also been rising. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think Ethereum is, looking for its next narrative. There was this whole conversation a few years ago around switching to proof of stake, underlying when you look underneath, what's being developed on Ethereum, there is so much happening and so much development taking place, whether it's like decentralized financial services and products, real world assets like US Treasuries being tokenized through products like Ondo. So there is a lot happening under the hood. It just seems like it needs its next catalyst. And, at the same time, you've seen a really strong migration of mindshare developers' relative interest towards Solana over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think a lot of that has taken away the narrative from Ethereum. Solana has cheaper fees. It is developing, financial products that are being used far more often and by a larger audience, certainly a retail audience than Ethereum. And so I think, when you look at the ETH BTC chart or why Ethereum maybe hasn't performed to the extent that Bitcoin has this year, I think Solana and some of its other layer one competitors have definitely had an impact. And, I think Ethereum really needs to address its fees and its long-term positioning. When you look at a platform like Solana, it's taken a lot of the air out of the room from Ethereum being this, internet, internet of everything, build applications on here. The transaction fees have been a mitigating factor. And so, I think between Solana and some of the catalysts that have already played out, there is a bit of pressure on Ethereum to really find what's next and find its proper footing within the broader ecosystem. Bitcoin as an example, it's not as if there is a significant amount of development happening on the Bitcoin chain, but it is, the first and largest and still has that like connotation that gold has when people think of crypto, they obviously think of Bitcoin first. So Bitcoin as the first mover and the first true digital asset will always have that positioning despite the lack of development happening on it. As an example, Ethereum has had success in terms of the products and services that have been developed on it, the evolution it's had from when it launched, but with a increasingly competitive environment with competing L1s and the rise of layer twos, it really needs to find its next narrative and its overall fitting within the broader ecosystem.
What is Bitcoin's next competitor, biggest competitor for its purpose? And, there's big debate as to what the purpose of Bitcoin is, but what do you think is the purpose and the competitor for Bitcoin?
Yeah, look, like I just said, like, when you look at the Bitcoin network, there is, I'd say more recently there has been a shift towards development on chain and looking to address transaction costs and looking to build solutions that will allow further development on the Bitcoin network. But that's not really what people are investing in Bitcoin for. It is the most well-known, well-established, most transparent and decentralized cryptocurrency. And, that's what's driving the inflows. You look at the 21 billion of inflows that have come in through the ETF products. I don't believe those investors are looking for, future potential with respect to what will be developed on chain on the Bitcoin network, more so as a proxy for the overall digital asset ecosystem. It is the largest and longest serving digital asset. And, people will often, look to it as a general proxy. And so, it's a good question. What could potentially compete with Bitcoin? For a long time, people thought Ethereum could, but when you look at some of the differences today, it's really hard to imagine that anything truly looks to compete with Bitcoin as it's positioned today.
Here's my perspective, and I'm just thinking from the perspective of of a retail customer here. So if I want to speculate, I want to borderline gamble. I'll buy Doge or Shiba or some meme coin that's popping up, and if I lose my money, I lose my money. If I 10x, great, right? I would maximize my risk versus return if I really just want to speculate. If I want to transact B2B or even B2C, I use the stable coin. For me, if I'm just taking the extremes, there's no real place for me for Bitcoin. If I want to store value, I buy a house. you know.
Yeah, I
So
mean, look,
evaluate how I thought there. Yeah.
yeah, no, look, I think that's a good way to look at the market today. What we often see is, that segment of the market that's looking to buy Dogecoin, meme coins, maybe more speculative cryptos along the risk curve. What a lot of these guys will often do, what they will, you know, on the basis that there are profits to realize, they will roll those into Bitcoin and maintain those assets, in Bitcoin and build up their Bitcoin balance overall, which has far less risk than some of these altcoins, but still has meaningful upside 5, 10, 20 years out. And so a lot of, traders or speculators within the ecosystem look to these, thinner traded, newer altcoins to ultimately build up the amount of Bitcoin that they hold. And so from a trading strategy perspective, there are meaningful opportunities to build up your pile of Bitcoin through trading some of these other altcoins. But you're right, in terms of, Bitcoin and transacting, this whole concept that existed a long time ago of, when will I be able to buy Bitcoin with my coffee with Bitcoin? Well, that's long past. There are stable coins now that will largely fill that gap. So that's a fair, critique or analysis. But ultimately, Bitcoin is the entry point for most people with respect to buying digital assets. The most common example is people hear about digital assets, they'll buy Bitcoin. You don't see them jumping to Dogecoin. And so it's a really good entry point for people to understand digital assets and the technology and learning more about the industry. And so that's why these ETF products are so great for the overall industry. They're introducing a whole new cohort of people into the industry through products that they're comfortable and familiar with. From there, ultimately, we expect these people to have more of a vested interest in what's taking place, understanding the technology better. And from there, they'll ultimately learn about the broader ecosystem, which then pushes them towards Ethereum or other layer ones, layer two blockchains, DeFi protocols. And there's such a vast and quickly growing ecosystem that there is so much to learn about and so much to be interested in this technology that Bitcoin really is the gateway for people to enter into. And so, we think that it still serves a purpose. It will continue to be the market leader within this segment for a long period of time. And I don't think anyone today is expecting it to solve for global payments or anything in particular, which I think ultimately gives it that stability.
What is the next use case that will drive the adoption curve or accelerate it, or at least something that you're really looking forward to?
Yeah, look, I think stable coins have really emerged. You're talking about between the two largest, approximately 125 to 150 billion dollars of stable coins in circulation. That's massive. And, a lot of that's being used for trade. A lot of it's being used for global settlement. I think looking ahead, you're going to see more merchants around the world, more businesses around the world start to accept USDC. And so that will really open up, this industry in a meaningful way. So stablecoins would be one of the fastest growing examples of real utility that crypto solves for today. At the same time, we have seen a growing trend towards on-chain activity. A lot of the early days of Bitcoin and crypto had been, driven by, platforms like BitBuy and CoinSquare really do all the heavy lifting for me. I just want exposure. I don't want my own wallet. I don't want my own keys. That's too much responsibility for me. But as the industry's evolved and user experience has improved and the technology has improved, we've seen people shift on chain in a meaningful way over the course of the last 12 months, truthfully. And so what you're going to see is this emergence or this continuation of improved on-chain applications that are going to drive more people to transact on chain than ever before.
What are some of the biggest changes in terms of popularity of products on your platform, WonderFi, over the last couple of years?
That's a great question. So WonderFi primarily operates centralized exchanges, which serve as the on-ramp or off-ramp for people to access digital assets. Over the last few years, WonderFi has been focused on consolidating a market-leading position in the Canadian market. And through that process, we have acquired 5 crypto trading platforms and now have a user base of over 1.7 million Canadians across retail and institutional accounts that have $1.3 billion on our platforms today. We operate 2 brands, BitBuy and CoinSquare, which have been market leaders for over 10 years in the Canadian market. One of the biggest advancements we've had over the last few years has been the introduction of staking. And so as we allow Canadians to onboard their dollars into the digital asset ecosystem, a big question is, what can I do with these digital assets if I'm a long-term believer in them? One of the things that is now available to Canadians in particular is this idea of staking. And so if you're a long-term holder of Ethereum and you're going to hold your assets on BitBuy or CoinSquare, today you can passively earn 3 to 5% in rewards paid out in Ethereum units, and those your principal is staked directly into the Ethereum network, which significantly mitigates any potential counterparty risk. And so staking would be a great example of how we've worked with regulators to develop unique and bespoke regulatory frameworks for products and services beyond the spot trading of digital assets. And so a regulatory framework around spot trading was really important to stabilize the Canadian market and to allow for consolidation to occur as we've participated in a meaningful way. Now, it's very important for us to work with regulators to understand what other products and services are our participants looking for, and how can we strike the balance between innovation and consumer protection to roll out these products in a reliable way for users. Staking is a great example, and we're working on other initiatives now that will continue to broaden the offering that exists on BitBuy and CoinSquare.
Based on the data, trading data you've seen on BitBuy and CoinSquare, have you noticed any shifts in trading patterns for what people prefer in terms of protocols? Do they prefer Bitcoin now more? Are they staking things more? Are they going into Ethereum more? Are they looking at the meme coins more?
Yeah, I mean, look, typically you will see a meaningful percentage of activity originate around Bitcoin and Ethereum. These are still the two most well-known, well-established digital assets with, the longest track record. And most people will start by buying Bitcoin and then Ethereum and then learning further about some of these other assets and what problems they're trying to solve. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen a meaningful increase in relative interest and trading volumes for Solana. Our platforms have always sold, a meaningful amount of Dogecoin. And so there's been this consistent, trend within Dogecoin, Pepe, Shiba Inu, which are the large cap meme coins, if you will. More recently, we've seen, a lot of interest around some of these newer altcoins. For us, we want to be mindful of where our users' interest lies. We want to offer them as wide a range of digital assets as possible to allow them to decide what subcategory or what assets speak to them directly and which ones they're enthusiastic about investing in. And so for us, our goal is to offer as many digital assets as we can across as many of the subcategories as possible, so that we have as diverse an offering as possible for Canadians to come in and get exposure to the assets that they believe in.
What's next for WonderFi?
So WonderFi has had a really busy couple of years, as mentioned. We've focused on consolidating the Canadian market. We've acquired 5 Canadian crypto trading platforms. This year, we acquired the Canadian accounts from Bitstamp as they left the Canadian market. We've also made an acquisition in Australia, which has allowed us to build up a presence within the Australia Asia Pacific region. As we've focused on migrating all of our accounts under one regulated platform within Canada, we now want to bring our products and services to jurisdictions beyond the Canadian market. And so Australia, Asia Pacific region is a really good starting point for us. We're really excited about the volumes and the growth that we anticipate in that region over the coming quarters. Furthermore, we're looking for other jurisdictions that we can bring our products and services to. As a public company, we're really focused on jurisdictions that have regulatory clarity that will allow us to invest in those markets with confidence and build a long-term presence in those regions. Beyond that, we announced WonderFi Labs earlier this year. WonderFi Labs is really focused on-chain applications. We're looking to build out the tools that will allow participants globally to interact on-chain with a reliable provider like WonderFi that has a clear track record building products and services in the digital asset ecosystem that focus on trust, transparency, and compliance. And so when you think about everything that happens on chain today, there is a lot of products and services that are built with short-term incentives in mind. A lot of these products are venture backed. A lot of these products are built around a token shortly after product launch. A lot of these products use those tokens to create short-term incentives to drive early adoption to these products. WonderFi is in a position where we can build products and services the right way and build them with the long term in mind. Much as we've done with centralized exchanges, we're looking to take that same philosophy to on-chain applications. And so WonderFi is focused on WonderFi Labs is focused on building out a non-custodial wallet, a layer two blockchain, and building out decentralized applications within the financial services subsector that will resonate with a global audience and allow them to continue to interact on chain with a trusted provider like WonderFi.
All right. Well, we'll put the links down below. Follow Dean and WonderFi there. Thanks very much for your time, Dean. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me and look forward to coming back soon.
Absolutely. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.